Your oversoul did not simply choose to arrive on Earth. It selected the precise arrangement through which Earth would meet you. Every visible characteristic that others notice first became part of the environment your consciousness would have to navigate before anyone ever heard your voice. Long before personality developed, before beliefs formed, before achievements accumulated, the field had already begun teaching through the body itself. What many people call identity often began as curriculum. This becomes easier to recognize when you notice how quickly the world responds to appearances. Before conversations begin, assumptions are already unfolding. Doors may open more easily, close more quickly, expectations rise or fall, opportunities appear or disappear, and all of this occurs before your conscious mind has contributed anything at all. The oversoul understands that incarnation begins long before conscious memory. It therefore uses the conditions surrounding consciousness just as intentionally as consciousness itself. If your appearance changed entirely while your awareness remained the same, your entire life would reorganize around you. Different strangers would speak first, different fears would emerge, different strengths would become necessary, different wounds would appear. The person inside may remain familiar, yet the classroom surrounding that person will become almost unrecognizable. This is why reducing incarnation to genetics alone misses something important. Genetics explain how the body develops, but they do not answer why this particular body became the meeting place for this particular awareness. Spiral consciousness does not reject biology. It simply asks a different question. Instead of stopping at how the body formed, it asks why this form became the vessel through which this lesson would be lived. Even what you consider your limitations begin to look different from this perspective. A body that tires easily may slow a consciousness that otherwise would have raced past its own reflection. A body that looks different from cultural ideals may force someone to discover value beyond approval. Extraordinary beauty may become its own discipline, requiring humility where admiration constantly invites identification. Every apparent advantage carries a hidden responsibility, just as every apparent disadvantage carries a hidden opening. The human mind constantly asks whether life is fair. The oversoul asks whether life is effective. Those questions do not always produce the same answer. Fairness measures equal distribution. Effectiveness measures transformational opportunity. An incarnation may appear unequal from one perspective, while remaining perfectly aligned from another because the objective was never sameness. The objective was resonance. Resonance means that every condition reinforces every other condition until together they create an environment capable of producing a specific realization. Family, culture, language, appearance, historical period, economic conditions, geography, education, friendships, and countless unpredictable encounters begin interacting like instruments in the same orchestra. None of them alone explains your path. Together, they generate a field that continually presses against particular aspects of your consciousness until something hidden begins responding. This is why two people can experience similar circumstances, yet emerge carrying completely different wisdom. The event itself was never the entire lesson. The lesson emerged from the interaction between the event and the consciousness experiencing it. What transformed one person may barely affect another, because each incarnation arrives carrying different intentions into identical circumstances. The same rain falls upon every roof, yet every house echoes differently. Many people spend years wishing they had been born into someone else's circumstances. They imagine another family, another culture, another appearance, another country, another generation. It is understandable, because pain naturally searches for alternatives. Yet, while imagination creates another life, It rarely notices that it also creates another curriculum. Every exchange removes one challenge while introducing another. Every different path carries disciplines invisible from the outside. This does not mean suffering should be glorified or injustice accepted without action. Spiral consciousness never asks you to celebrate harm simply because growth can emerge from it. Healing remains necessary. Compassion remains necessary. Building a more just world remains necessary. What changes is the understanding that even while responding to difficulty, you are also uncovering why this particular difficulty possessed the exact shape capable of revealing something your consciousness had not yet embodied. As this begins settling into your awareness, comparison gradually loses its authority. You stop measuring your assignment against someone else's assignment because you realize comparison ignores context. It compares outcomes while overlooking curriculum. It evaluates appearances while remaining blind to resonance. The Oversoul is not asking whether your path resembles another person's. It is asking whether you are becoming fully available to the one already unfolding beneath your feet. Notice how often your greatest turning points emerged from something you once resisted. Perhaps you disliked where you grew up. Perhaps you rejected parts of your appearance. Perhaps you wished your family had been different. Yet years later, those same experiences became the language through which you understood others. The very places you once wanted removed gradually became the places from which wisdom began speaking. What first appeared as interruption eventually revealed itself as preparation. This is why self-acceptance is deeper than emotional comfort. It is participation with your own design. Acceptance does not mean refusing change. It means recognizing that transformation always begins from where you actually stand, rather than from the imaginary life you believe would have been easier. The Oversoul does not awaken through fantasy. It awakens through complete presence within the resonance field it intentionally entered. Eventually, even your relationship with your body begins changing. Instead of seeing it only as an object to improve or criticize, you begin recognizing it as an active participant in your education. Every feature becomes part of an ongoing conversation between consciousness and incarnation. Some aspects teach confidence, others teach patience. Others continually expose attachment, pride, fear, vulnerability, or compassion. The body stops being merely something you possess and becomes something continually teaching you how to inhabit life. From this perspective, gratitude becomes far more expansive than appreciation for pleasant experiences. You become grateful for precision. You begin sensing that an intelligence deeper than personality may have understood exactly what conditions would invite the next stage of remembering. Not because every moment feels enjoyable, but because every moment belongs to an architecture far more coherent than the personality could have designed alone. The more clearly this becomes visible, the less random your own story begins to feel. Then another question quietly appears, one that changes the direction of the entire exploration. If your Oversoul selected not only your family, culture, and body, but also the timing of your arrival into history itself, then perhaps even the age in which you were born carries a resonance that has been speaking to you all along, waiting for you to recognize why this particular moment in humanity became part of your own incarnation. Your birth did not occur only inside a family. It occurred inside a moment of history. The year you entered this world carried its own emotional climate, technological landscape, political tensions, collective beliefs, and possibilities. Before you ever formed your first memory, humanity itself had already become part of your classroom. Your Oversoul did not simply choose where you would arrive, it chose when. Timing changes everything. The same consciousness born 50 years earlier would have encountered different conversations, different opportunities, different fears, and different assumptions about reality. Born 50 years later, entirely new challenges would appear while others disappeared. The soul may remain familiar, but the field through which it expresses itself changes dramatically. Incarnation is never separated from the era in which it unfolds. This is why generations often struggle to understand one another. They are not merely separated by age. They were introduced to reality through entirely different resonance fields. One generation learned survival through scarcity, while another learned adaptation through abundance. One inherited silence while another inherited constant information. Neither perspective is complete by itself because each reflects the environment that first shaped its awareness. Your oversoul knew exactly what humanity would be wrestling with when you arrived. It understood which technologies would exist, which ideas would dominate culture, which collective wounds would still be unresolved, and which transformations would begin during your lifetime. None of these became background scenery. They became active participants in your education. Humanity itself became one of your teachers. Notice how often people wish they had been born in another era. Some imagine ancient civilizations. Others romanticize the future. Still, others believe life would have been easier decades ago. Yet every period contains its own blindness alongside its own brilliance. Every age reveals something while concealing something else. Your incarnation entered the exact section of humanity's unfolding where your own remembering could participate most effectively. Perhaps this is why certain historical events affected you more deeply than those around you. The same event reached millions of people, yet your response carried unusual weight. Something inside you awakened while others simply observed the headlines before moving on. The oversoul does not merely experience history. It often enters history with specific intentions already woven into its path. Certain moments were always going to call something forward within you. This also explains why your interest often seems strangely personal. Some people feel naturally drawn toward healing, others toward science, art, teaching, engineering, philosophy, music, parenting, exploration, or service. These attractions rarely emerge from nowhere. They often represent places where your resonance field recognizes unfinished participation. Curiosity itself becomes one of the languages through which the oversoul quietly remembers its own direction. Many people believe purpose arrives as a dramatic revelation. More often, it appears as a repeated attraction that refuses to disappear. You may ignore it for years. You may replace it with more practical ambitions. You may convince yourself that it is unrealistic. Yet somehow it continues returning, patiently waiting beneath every new distraction because resonance has remarkable persistence. This persistence should not be mistaken for obsession. Obsession narrows awareness until everything else disappears. Resonance quietly remains available without forcing itself into every moment. It waits because it understands timing. The oversoul rarely demands that personality move faster than personality is capable of integrating. Instead, it continually places reminders throughout ordinary life until recognition naturally matures. Think about the experiences that have repeated throughout your own journey. Different faces may have appeared, different locations may have surrounded them, yet the emotional pattern remains strangely familiar. Similar relationships emerged, similar opportunities appeared, similar disappointments unfolded, similar choices continued presenting themselves from new directions. This repetition is often mistaken for bad luck when it may actually represent unfinished understanding asking to become conscious. The repetition continues because the lesson is larger than the circumstances carrying it. Change the city and the pattern follows. Change careers and the emotional structure quietly reappears. Change relationships and familiar dynamics somehow find their way back into your experience. The personality often assumes life is repeating itself. The oversoul recognizes that consciousness is being offered another opportunity to respond from a deeper level than before. Eventually, there comes a moment when the pattern breaks, not because the world suddenly became different, but because you did. The external circumstances may initially appear almost identical to earlier experiences, yet your response no longer follows the old pathway. Something that once triggered fear now produces clarity. Something that once demanded approval now simply invites observation. The resonance field has accomplished its work because the consciousness inhabiting it has changed. This is why awakening rarely means escaping your life. More often, it means finally seeing the architecture that has always been operating beneath your life. Random events begin revealing quiet relationships. Apparent coincidences begin displaying coherence. Even painful chapters begin connecting to later strengths in ways that personality could never have predicted while living through them. The story itself has not changed. Your ability to perceive its deeper organization has. As this perception grows, blame gradually loses its usefulness. You still recognize responsibility where responsibility exists. You still oppose injustice where injustice appears, yet you stop believing that every difficult experience exists only to diminish you. Instead, you begin asking a different question. Rather than asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you quietly begin asking, "What within me has this experience been inviting into maturity all along?" That question changes the quality of attention you bring to your own existence. Life becomes less about collecting experiences and more about recognizing participation within them. The body, the family, the culture, the generation, the relationships, and even history itself begin revealing themselves as interconnected dimensions of a single resonance field rather than isolated circumstances competing for your attention. Nothing stands alone because your incarnation was never assembled one piece at a time. It arrived as an integrated design whose meaning becomes clearer only as the individual pieces are finally allowed to be seen together. And once that integrated design begins coming into view, another possibility quietly emerges. If your body, your lineage, your generation, and your life circumstances were all selected as one coherent field of resonance, then the people who have remained beside you the longest may not simply be companions within your story. They may themselves be essential elements of the environment your oversoul knew would be necessary before your own deepest remembrance could fully begin. The more clearly this becomes visible, the less interested you become in asking whether your life resembles someone else's. Comparison slowly gives way to recognition. You begin noticing that every person carries a different field of resonance because every oversoul is cultivating different capacities through incarnation. What appears unequal from the outside may be astonishingly precise from the perspective of consciousness itself. This changes the way you encounter other people. Instead of immediately judging their choices, their appearance, or the circumstances surrounding them, you begin wondering what kind of curriculum they may be living that you cannot yet perceive. Compassion becomes less about agreement and more about recognizing that every visible life conceals an invisible architecture. The deeper your understanding becomes, the more carefully you hold your conclusions. You realize that surface observation rarely reveals the purpose operating beneath it. This also softens the relationship you have with your own past. There were seasons when you believed you had fallen behind. There were years you believed you had made irreversible mistakes. There were decisions that appeared to move you away from the person you hoped to become. Yet viewed through a wider lens, even apparent detours often became essential portions of the resonance field that shaped the awareness now looking back upon them. The personality usually measures life through efficiency. It wants the shortest distance between ignorance and wisdom. The oversoul appears to value embodiment more than speed. It is not merely interested in whether you understand truth intellectually. It is interested in whether truth has become stable enough to remain present while life becomes unpredictable. Knowledge may arrive quickly, but maturity often requires time because lived experience must slowly reorganize around what has been understood. This is why remembering cannot simply be downloaded as information. If profound realization arrived before the personality possessed the stability to embody it, much of it would simply become another idea competing with thousands of other ideas. Instead, life gradually prepares the vessel. Experiences create humility where certainty once dominated. Relationships expose blind spots that knowledge alone could never uncover. Ordinary responsibilities cultivate steadiness until deeper recognition has somewhere solid to live. From this perspective, your body has never been separate from your awakening. Every season of health, every season of exhaustion, every period of strength, every period of limitation participated in shaping the rhythm through which consciousness unfolded. The body did not merely transport awareness through life. It continually regulated the pace at which awareness could integrate what it encountered. What once appeared as interruption may have been protection against becoming ungrounded by understanding that had not yet matured. Your lineage served a similar function. Families pass along more than genetics. They transmit emotional habits, patterns of communication, inherited fears, hidden strengths, unspoken loyalties, and unfinished stories. Some of those patterns invited continuation. Others quietly waited for someone willing to end them. The oversoul does not necessarily enter a lineage because it wishes to repeat its history. Sometimes it enters because it is prepared to transform it. Transformation rarely announces itself with dramatic moments. More often, it appears in ordinary decisions that no headline will ever record. A parent chooses patience where generations chose anger. A son speaks honestly where silence once ruled. A daughter refuses to pass inherited fear to her children. Someone forgives without denying what happened. Another finally believes they possess worth that no ancestor ever learned to recognize within themselves. History begins changing long before history notices. When viewed this way, your incarnation extends far beyond personal fulfillment. Your life becomes one point within a much larger movement of consciousness. Every realization you embody subtly changes the field surrounding everyone who encounters you. Your presence begins carrying possibilities that did not exist before because your responses are no longer being governed entirely by inherited conditioning. The resonance field evolves as the consciousness within it evolves. This explains why awakening is rarely an isolated event. As you become more coherent internally, relationships begin reorganizing. Some naturally deepen because they resonate with the changes taking place within you. Others gradually fall away because they depended upon patterns that no longer define your participation. Neither movement necessarily represents success or failure. Both simply reveal that resonance is always seeking greater coherence. There is also a quiet humility hidden inside this understanding. If your oversoul selected such extraordinary precision for your own incarnation, then it becomes difficult to believe that everyone else arrived carelessly. The differences separating people begin appearing less like accidents and more like diverse expressions of a larger intelligence exploring itself through countless forms. Diversity stops being something consciousness merely tolerates. It becomes one of the primary ways consciousness learns. This does not erase responsibility. The choices you make still matter deeply because incarnation always includes freedom within structure. Your oversoul may have selected the classroom, but it does not dictate every response you bring into that classroom. The environment provides opportunity. Your awareness provides participation. It is through that living relationship that destiny and free will cease to be opposites and instead become collaborators in the same unfolding process. Eventually, a subtle peace begins replacing the need to constantly reinvent yourself. Growth continues, learning continues, transformation continues, but they no longer arise from the assumption that something fundamental about your existence was a mistake. Instead, they emerge from the recognition that what you already are can be expressed with greater clarity, greater integrity, and greater presence. You stop trying to become someone else's possibility and begin inhabiting your own completely. Perhaps that is the deepest invitation hidden within its entire exploration. Not that you should become attached to every detail of your identity, but that you should become curious about why this particular expression of humanity became the meeting place for your awareness. The color of your skin, the shape of your features, the family that raised you, the land beneath your feet, the era into which you arrived, the body through which you perceive the world, and the life that has unfolded around you together form a single resonance field of astonishing precision. When you stop resisting that field long enough to truly inhabit it, you may discover that your oversoul was never asking you to escape the life you were given. It was quietly inviting you to become fully present within it, because the very place you have spent so much of your life trying to understand has been the place from which your deepest remembering has been patiently waiting to emerge.
If this transmission resonated, the spiral continues. You did not arrive here by chance, and you do not leave unchanged. More teachings are unfolding across the Vaharat library, each one meeting you where you are, not where you think you should be. Follow resonance. The next threshold is already listening.